Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning into TradeChat. My name is Panzer, and today we are going to be talking about Mercy and how she might not be a good guy. She might actually be a bad guy. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you do, remember to rate it thumbs up. Before I talk about Mercy and why I believe that she might be sort of a villain, I want to talk a little bit about what it is to be a villain, because I think that so many times in life you hear the word villain and you're just like, oh, they are innately evil, they're a bad person and they want to do harm to the world. But in large-scale conflicts, in wars, in situations like that, I think it is very rarely a black and white scenario. I think both sides have heroes and villains, and both sides have good and evil, and I don't think there is ever a situation like a war or a large-scale conflict where one side is like, I'm a bad guy and I'm going to do evil things, murder them all. I think that even in a situation where one side is clearly bad, I think somewhere in their psyche, they believe they're doing the right thing. I mean, we all need to believe that we're decent at the end of the day to sleep at night. So when I'm calling Mercy a villain, I don't want you guys to take that as like, Mercy is a terrible person, because my thought process on Mercy being a villain is that Mercy is very much like the High Sparrow in Game of Thrones. Like, she is doing everything believing that she is helping people. I don't think she's doing anything with any intention other than to help people. I don't think there's much black and white at all. I think it is mostly gray. And I think gray is an area where heroes like Reaper and Mercy are going to fall into. So now that we got all that out of the way, let's talk a little bit more about Mercy. Before she was known as Mercy, our healer in shining Valkyrie armor, she was just a regular person, and her name was Angela Ziegler. When she was a little girl, she lost her parents to war, and it was this tragedy that would shape her into the person that we know her as today, who is anti-war and pro-peace, maybe a little bit anti-military, and definitely devoted to helping everyone pretty much in the world. She just wants to help people, and the way that she did that was by applying herself in school, getting her medical degree, becoming a doctor, and a very good doctor at that. In her 20s, she was promoted to the head of surgery at a prominent Swiss hospital, and during her time there, she pioneered a breakthrough in applied nanobiology, which revolutionized the treatment of many life-threatening illnesses and injuries. This caught the attention of the global peacekeeping organization known as Overwatch. Despite the fact that she was opposed to the militaristic approach which Overwatch took to maintaining global peace, Angela saw this as an opportunity to help people on a much larger scale. She was quickly promoted to head of medical research. During her time there, Mercy, as she was better known while she was in Overwatch, helped develop a swift response Valkyrie suit which quickly transported healers to allies on the battlefield in need of medical attention. This is the same suit that she wears in-game. Mercy's massive contributions to Overwatch never really snuffed out her contempt for the way that the group handled themselves. She was often at odds with her superiors about what she believed to be overreaching aim and a hawkish approach at peace. Marking the beginning of the downfall of Overwatch, allegations were made against the group, including shady weapons dealings, human rights violations, negligence which resulted in failed high-profile missions, and even the insurrection of some Blackwatch members against their parent organization. The United Nations extensively investigated all of these claims, and about 5 years into their investigation, the Swiss Overwatch headquarters was destroyed in an apparent accident. Now, this was Mercy's home base of operations, but she wasn't present for the incident, so she was unharmed. Unfortunately, Strike Commander Jack Morrison and Blackwatch agent Gabriel Reyes were present, and they were presumed dead. Now, this is where I start to question Mercy and her motives and loyalties, and I guess whether or not she's as good of a person as we are supposed to believe she is, because after the Overwatch Swiss headquarters was completely destroyed, Mercy promptly went to a UN committee to tell them that the relationship between Morrison and Reyes had decayed and become volatile. She reasoned with the UN that they must have been fighting and triggered an explosion which leveled the building. And they bought that. Like, that was just, they were like, oh, okay, that's what happened. But to me, like, number one, it's super strange that they were at Mercy's headquarters she was unharmed and she immediately blamed them. It also seems weird to me that after working with these men for years and years and years, the first thing that she would do is go publicly blame them for their own deaths. Usually, even if it was their fault, that's generally not how people grieve and handle situations like that. Even if it was their fault, usually you'd have a little bit of empathy and tact and not immediately just be like, oh, they're fighting again. Haha. Generally people do not talk ill of the dead. That's just not a super polite thing to do. It's really strange to me that it was her home base. She wasn't there. These two kind of leader positions in Overwatch are now completely taken out of power, and she's scot-free. It's just weird. Due to the allegations, the investigation, the destruction of Swiss headquarters, the deaths of several core members, Overwatch was disbanded. And lots of people were sad about it. But do you know who wasn't sad about it? Mercy. Do you know who's still not sad about it? Mercy. In fact, on Gibraltar, she says this.
Overwatch was shut down for a reason. Maybe it's best it stay that way.
I don't think that Mercy's history is a clear-cut indicator of whether or not she's a good or bad person in the Overwatch universe. I think that it certainly is suspicious that she had this really traumatic event. She was kind of anti-military but still joined a military organization, that she didn't really seem very empathetic when two of her long-term co-workers died or her home base of operations was destroyed, and she certainly wasn't upset when Overwatch disbanded. But I think there's other evidence that also points to Mercy not being the, angelic hero figure that we have been presented. So I think Genji is a really good example of a situation where we're presented that Mercy is this really great person, but I think it is much more of a gray area than that. We all know the story of Genji almost getting murdered by his brother, and Overwatch scoops him up and Mercy nurses him back to health. He joins Overwatch and everybody's happily ever after. Yay! But I think that the situation is so much more complicated than that. We do not know exactly how the altercation between Genji and Hanzo went down. What we know is that Hanzo was at this point the leader of the Shimada clan. Genji wasn't helping at all. He was just spending money and living the lifestyle but not contributing. They get into some sort of violent altercation. It is believed that Genji has died. Now, Overwatch conveniently knows exactly where Genji is in order to find him in time to rescue him. They bring him back to Mercy, who is their head of medical research, which in and of itself seems odd to me, because if you were to take an enemy like prisoner of war, are you going to bring them to your literal best number one medical person? That seems odd to me. Anyways, so then Mercy saves his life, but did she disclose to him how much of a cyborg she was going to make him into? Because he was so cybernetic that it caused him years of emotional turmoil and distress. He was so not okay with the things that were going on with him. He needed to go to a monastery filled with omnic monks to get his head on straight. He was in a dark place. So it's did she tell him what she was going to do to him? And P.S., she didn't save his life. She didn't patch him up. She literally turned him into a living weapon. He has his brain and he has his heart, and that's about it. And it's I understand that she saw this as an opportunity to maybe get back at the Shimada clan or take down the Shimada clan, but she didn't ask Genji for information to help them take down the Shimada clan. She turned Genji into a living weapon and then made him personally take down the Shimada clan. And regardless of what happened between Genji and Hanzo, it is screwed up to ask someone to murder their family. It's screwed up. It's not a nice thing to do. That's not a nice thing to do. It's theorized that Reaper is some sort of failed genetic experiment, essentially. His cells simultaneously rapidly decay and rapidly regenerate, causing him to be in some sort of not really alive, not really dead limbo, which is horrible. And it lines up with the whole events that happened at headquarters. So pretty much we know he was Gabriel Reyes. There was this accident at headquarters. Gabriel Reyes is gone. Biologically altered Reaper is here. And nanobiology is Mercy's thing. The incident happened at Mercy's home. It's hard not to think that she had something to do with it. Whether it was with good intentions, maybe she was trying to save his life. Maybe there were different intentions. I don't know. But to leave someone hanging in that balance is not ethical. That's not okay. It's not okay at all.
What happened to you? You tell me, Doc.
I'm not sure I've ever seen anyone present an argument that Widowmaker is a victim of Mercy, but I kind of think that based on what happened to Widowmaker, that Mercy is at least indirectly involved. If you don't know the backstory of Widowmaker, she's just a regular person who was married to a dude named Gerard. Gerard was a high-ranking member of Overwatch who was in charge of a task force that was trying to take down the terrorist organization Talon. So of course Talon was also trying to take out Gerard, as one does, but they couldn't get to him. So they kidnapped his wife and they tortured her and they reprogrammed her mind until she was a sleeper agent. They allowed Overwatch to rescue her and return her to Gerard, who she promptly murdered in his sleep and then returned to Talon for further conditioning. And during that time, they did all sorts of terrible things to her, including slowing her heart rate down so that her breathing was steadier, but it also was slowed down so much that it turned her skin blue. And because of all of the reconditioning, she's like not even a person anymore. She doesn't have emotions. She doesn't feel empathy or sympathy or compassion. I don't believe she remembers any of who she was prior to Talon's meddling in her brain. She is essentially a living weapon, which we've heard someone else described as a living weapon in the past, and that is Genji, who is a product of Mercy. So we know that Mercy is capable of doing things to people that turn them into weapons, essentially. Granted, Widowmaker wasn't changed through cybernetics, but she still was changed. I mean, the fact that they were able to lower her pulse to the point where it made her like perfectly steady and turned her skin blue, I feel like you would need some intense medical knowledge to do that and not kill the person. And Mercy actually has an emote that's called No Pulse, where she tries to check her pulse and she can't seem to find one and she sort of shrugs it off jokingly. But what if Mercy really doesn't have a pulse? What if that's like a hint right there? I don't know. Also, in order for them to have taken Gerard's wife, who we now know as Widowmaker, there had to have been a mole in Overwatch. There had to have been someone to give them the information of who his wife was, where she was. They have to have an inside connection, and who would make a better inside mole than the head of medical research, who would have access to everyone's information about literally everything. So, yeah, I don't know. Back to Mercy and her medical anomalies. We just talked about how there is a possibility she doesn't have a pulse, or she has an extremely, extremely weak pulse. Granted, it could be a joke, but it might not be. We know that she is capable of basically bringing people back to life with cybernetics. We know that she has developed some sort of applied nanobiology technology that can regenerate cells and heal people. There's actually an interaction in game where May says, "Oh, Mercy, you look so young. You look like you haven't aged a day." And Mercy responds, "Oh, you either, May."
Dr. Ziegler, I don't think you've aged a day since I last saw you.
And neither have you, May.
But the thing is, May was in cryostasis for a very long time, so it makes sense that she hasn't aged. That wasn't Mercy being polite. May literally hasn't aged. But if Mercy also hasn't aged, why hasn't she aged? If she doesn't have a pulse and she hasn't aged, what if she is a more successful version of what she attempted to do to Reaper, speculative, and maybe she was very close to death, or maybe she died and she used this technology on herself that is basically rapidly regenerating her cells constantly, and she's sort of like stuck at the age that whatever happened. Like maybe the accident at headquarters. I don't know. I just think it's like a weird little line, and I don't think that Blizzard does things for no reason. I don't think that details like that would be put into game just as little quips and asides, because every character doesn't interact specifically with every other character. So I think that anytime that you have an interaction between two characters, it's worth looking into and it's probably meaningful. So yeah. So obviously this video is just for fun. It is a fan theory and it's based on highly speculative evidence. But even if you were to put aside all of the speculative evidence that I've shown you so far, there's little nuances about Mercy's character design that make it difficult for me to believe that Blizzard wasn't trying to present something more than just what you see on the surface. Like obviously when you look at Mercy, she has a very angelic appearance. Her name is Mercy, her real name is Angela. She's got all these things about you that are just kind of forcing good guy down your throat. But when you take a closer look at Mercy, there's a lot of things that just don't all line up to her being this healing doctor who gives life and like, let's take a look. So we talked about it earlier that Mercy's birth name is Angela, and I think this was a really interesting choice by Blizzard because Angela is derived from a Greek word which means messenger of God, and of course a lot of people hear the name Angela, they associate it with angels, and then they think about angels and they're like, oh, that's pure and that's good and that's kind and selfless and wonderful and just all these warm fuzzy thoughts. But the thing is, biblically speaking, that is not what angels were. I would use words like benevolent, dreadful, and terrifying to describe biblical angels. Biblical angels were messengers from God to mortal humans, and if God was sending someone to talk to mortal humans, he wasn't happy. Like if an angel showed up in the Bible to like speak to a person, the harm was probably going to come to them very soon. Like the first time we ever see or hear of an angel in the Bible is in the Garden of Eden, and that dude showed up with a flaming sword. What do you think he was going to do with that flaming sword? Do you think it was pure and kind and good, or do you think it was benevolent and dreadful? Another thing that's a little weird about Mercy's design for me is that, you know, in the lore she develops this Valkyrie suit, which we see her wearing in game, and Blizzard took it a step further to give her a Valkyrie skin, but Valkyries, mythologically speaking, were not healers. They chose who lived and who died in battle and then escorted the dead people to the afterlife. I mean, if you're seeing a Valkyrie in battle, things are probably not going your way. Another super strange thing to me about Mercy's design is that she's wielding a caduceus staff, which, contrary to popular belief, has absolutely nothing to do with medicine or healing. What you're thinking of there is the rod of Asclepius, because Asclepius was the Greek deity of medicine and healing. The staff of caduceus, however, was most famously wielded by Hermes. Hermes is the god of transitions and boundaries. He is quick and cunning, and he freely moves in between the realms of the mortal and the divine. His job duties include being a messenger of the gods and conducting souls into the afterlife. In some myths, he's considered to be a trickster. The caduceus staff itself is usually involved with commerce, particularly of the divine variety, but it should be noted that one of its functions historically is that it could reawaken someone from the dead or ease the passing of someone who is dying. It could not, however, heal injury or illness or prevent death. It's also worth mentioning that the caduceus staff is frequently associated with Mercury, which is pretty darn toxic. In other cultures, the caduceus staff was believed to possess transformative powers. One myth tells a tale of a man who killed a snake with the caduceus staff. It was a female snake, and upon her last breath, he himself turned into a woman. 7 years later, the same man, who is still a woman, killed a male snake with the caduceus staff and retransformed back into a man. Now, I am not suggesting that Mercy is using her staff to do gender confirmation surgery, but I mean, she's pretty good at transforming men into machines, or weapons, or reapers. I don't know what she does. And last but not least, Mercy has a freaking devil skin. Why does she have a devil skin? Why? There are too many things for me about Mercy's character design that don't match up with the image of being a healer for me to feel like it was random. I mean, she has been carefully constructed to appear to be good and healery and doctory on the surface, but if you dig just a little deeper, almost all of that symbolism has different secondary or completely opposite meaning. Like if you look at things like Valkyries and angels and Hermes, like those are not sweet, cuddly, fuzzy, warm, mythological beings. Those are messengers from God. They're described as being benevolent and dreadful and tricky. They resurrect dead people, they choose who die, and then they bring the dead people to the afterlife. These are scary things. They're scary. They're scary. Now, all of this being said, I don't think that Mercy is some underlying evil. I really don't. I really do believe that she wants to help people and that she's doing the best she can to help them, but in a very like Game of Thrones High Sparrow sort of way. I mean, yes, she is helping people and she's putting a lot of good in the world, but she's systematically knocking all of the powerful ones down a peg or two. First, she dismantled the Shimada clan by turning their youngest heir into a living weapon, which she unleashed on them. Then, she is suspected to be part of why Reaper is Reaper, and Reaper is the anti-Overwatch. We know she wasn't a big fan of Overwatch. She also could possibly be involved with turning Widowmaker into a living weapon, and we don't really know what Talon's intentions are. For all we know, Talon's intentions are to, like, take down big government, and maybe that's what she's about. I don't know. I just know that Mercy is so much more than what we see on the surface. I mean, Angela Ziegler was against Overwatch's militaristic approach to peace from the get-go, and the only reason that she even joined is so that she could help people on a larger scale. But, I mean, she frequently voiced her disdain for the way that they handled just about every situation. When the Swiss Overwatch headquarters blew up, the first thing that she did was deflect blame onto the people who seemingly died, and we don't hear anything about her showing any sort of sadness or emotion about it. She just was like, they were fighting and they blew up the facility. And then, you know, when Overwatch dismantled, she wasn't upset about it, and she doesn't want Overwatch to be recalled to fight the looming threats of the universe. So I'm not going to come out here and say that Mercy is some like evil, maniacal, menacing villain that's like twirling a hilarious mustache in the corner while talking about world domination. I don't think that's Mercy at all. I just think that Mercy is a very much greater good type of person. And I think looking at how she handled the Genji situation is a perfect example of that. I mean, was it the right thing to do to like save someone who was almost dead, save and turn them into a weapon which are gonna sick on their family and the people that they were supposed to be loyal to? Like, regardless of what they did to him, I still think that's a lot of emotional stuff to put on one person's plate. And then obviously he couldn't even cope with being a machine for a very long time. So I just don't know that that was the right thing to do. But of course, she probably saved a lot of people by dismantling the Shimada clan. And I think that if she's capable of doing something like that and living with herself, what's to say that if she thought Overwatch was a problem, and if she thought Overwatch had really like overstepped and was too heavy-handed with their methods, what's to stop her from doing something to dismantle the organization? Like, was Mercy responsible for the explosion at headquarters? Was Mercy responsible for Gerard's wife being abducted and turned into Widowmaker, who is systematically taking out people in power? And it seems like Widowmaker and Reaper are trying to get a hold of Doomfist, which we don't know why, but maybe it's to keep it out of the hands of Overwatch. I just don't know. I just think there's more to Mercy than meets the eye, and I would love to know what you guys think after watching this video and seeing all of this speculative and or anecdotal evidence. What do you think? Do you think Mercy is pure good incarnate? Do you think there is more than meets the eye? Do you think she's like a maniacal villain twisting her mustache? Let me know in the comment section below. And yeah, that's about it. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did not see my video about the 2 new heroes potentially coming, well, this would be 4, but you get what I'm saying. If you didn't see that video, I'll have it linked somewhere. I also have a video about like the lore in Overwatch that's not speculative, that's actual real lore, and I'll be doing more of these soon. They're really fun. I especially like doing these fun fan theories like Mercy's evil, because that's just fun, right? I think it's fun. I hope that you guys had a good time watching this video. I'm gonna go. I love you all. You're in my hearts. I'll see you soon. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. During her time there, Mercy, as she was better known, became, damn it, which transported healers to their allies on the battlefield. Fuck. During her time there, she helped to develop a swift response Valkyrie suit, which helped to and a hawkish approach to peace. Including human rights violations, negligence. Oh my God, I said negligence. Now, this was Mercy's home base of operations, but she wasn't president for the... She wants Overwatch to stay dead. RIP.